Solo players saved the MMO genre. Did they really? Let's have a look and talk about this.
Hey guys, it's Lucky here, and today we're going to talk about something interesting. I'm making this video because I realized something. Most of us are loners. Most of us don't have someone to play our favorite MMO with when we log in every day, but we keep coming back in spite of that. And even if we do have someone to play with, sometimes we just want to play alone. Take a look at Asmongold, who started his YouTube channel 8 years ago, teaching people how to solo group content.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold. I'm going to show y'all how to solo Conclave win. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold. And today we're continuing the series on how to solo Glory of the Category.
This is way back then.
It's your boy Asmongold. And today I'm going to show y'all how to solo.
Holy shit, how old were those? Like, I remember he even made achievement guides and stuff on YouTube. Like, I remember before he was like super big on Twitch, he would make like guides on how to get certain achievements and stuff. Like, I used to watch a few of his videos actually.
How to solo List Resort as a warrior.
And even those of us that do have friends have a hard time agreeing with those friends on what MMO to play and when, resulting on the people that do have friends also playing MMOs alone. This was made more apparent than ever when I tossed up a video on YouTube about MMOs that you can play alone or without friends, and it absolutely blew up. You guys devoured this thing, shedding some light on the fact that, hey, a lot of us spend most of our time playing MMOs solo, and we recognize that. MMORPGs are more and more turning into RPGs that happen to be online. Is it the developers implementing it, or is it us demanding it? Why is it that most players today log into their massively multiplayer game and spend the majority of their time playing?
What I think about like more and more solo content becoming available, like I've seen this back in the day with like Elder Scrolls Online, for example, where we would get like solo arenas, like Veteran Maelstrom Arena, for example. Like we would get like competitive solo content and stuff where we could test our skills and see how good we are with our character and everything. And there's like more and more solo stuff. If you look even at like WoW, like you have so much stuff you can farm solo, from like mounts to you can even level up your crafting if you're into that. Like there's more and more solo stuff coming for MMO games in general. And I don't think that's necessarily because players demand it. I mean, sure, there are those kind of players that don't want to play with others and just want to play solo in an MMO. So they're definitely also trying to make those people happy. But what I'm also seeing is there are more and more things added to the game that actually are, I'm not saying like forcing players to have smaller communities or pushing them to that, but if you look at like dungeon and group finders in modern MMOs, and we have seen this changes especially with World of Warcraft, where you just press one button, you have a certain class, a certain spec, and the tool will find a group for you. So you don't even need to have friends in game, you just use the group finder, right? So yeah, I think this is like evolution, you could say, of MMOs. It's not necessarily that the companies are trying to make the player base happy, but I know some players that prefer to play solo, so definitely they want to appeal to more people, right? Like more people are into these games and stuff, because there are a lot of solo players and now they can play MMOs too.
Alone. These are all interesting questions, but perhaps the most interesting question of all is it ruining the genre? Is the fact that MMOs are becoming more and more of a solo experience contributing to the decline of the genre? I'm going to try to answer all of those questions today. In the early days of the MMO genre, you needed a group for just about everything, and even if you could solo something, getting a group was generally a lot faster and more efficient. If you played an MMO back in the early 2000s, you probably had a pretty tight-knit circle, or at least a guild that you spent a lot of time with. Yeah, you probably even remember a lot of those players today. They were people that became not just online acquaintances, but actual friends that you logged into the game for and grouped up with and ran through content together. It was just part of the game, and it was just what you did. And if you didn't, well, you wouldn't be getting a whole lot done, and you'd probably quit. Except players didn't quit. MMOs were never more popular than they were when they were forcing introverts to join guilds and get things done, when MMOs were hard instead of easy. But today, the most popular MMOs seem to be designed around the player that is not interested in joining guilds, around the player that doesn't want to challenge in their questing experience. Dungeon finders, raid finders, not to mention the fastest way to level is usually what? It's the main story quest, which is almost entirely a solo experience carved straight through the MMO.
That's true. Some games like FF14 have a very, very good story actually, so if you have like a very, very good story in a game, New World unfortunately doesn't, then yeah, you are enjoying it and you can just do the normal PvE like questing experience. You don't need freaking endgame raiding, you don't need PvP, you're just doing the quests. ESO is also a good example. It has also, I think, a very good main story quest line. I think it's very, very fun. It's interesting how you actually are getting your soul back and everything in ESO, and it's interesting. Like, I don't want to spoil it too much for those of you that haven't played ESO yet, but it has also a very good story. World of Warcraft, I'm not sure if it has a very good story. I'm a bit disappointed with Shadowlands. It was not that exciting to me, the storyline. I do like some time walking campaigns a lot. Like, I think Mists of Pandaria is not too horrible. Wrath of the Lich King, of course. Now we have Classic. I think questing is fun there, but yeah, like, the better the questing experience is in the main story, the less you need actually multiplayer, in my opinion.
It's the main story quest, which is almost entirely a solo experience carved straight through the MMO. We are at a point now where it's often less productive and less efficient to play our massively multiplayer games with other players. Grouping up used to be the fastest way to level, if not the only way to level. Battles were difficult and it wasn't uncommon for there to be significant penalties for dying. You were all in it together. You actually needed each other.
Help me! I need help!
And every role in the group was incredibly important as a result. There was always a lot on the line, creating a lot of moments to bond with the players around you. If you survived that sketchy pull or managed to take the boss down, you'd celebrate. I still remember waiting for high-level healers to come res me in games like Lineage 2 to get hours of my experience back when we had died and lost it on death. I also remember actually having to use crowd control abilities to survive when someone in the group tab targeted the wrong enemy by accident.
Wow.
I miscalculated.
Everyone needed to be present and give it their all. But not just that, there was an incentive to bond with those players. There was an incentive to perform at your best. If you had a tank with clean pulls that could maintain aggro, or a healer that kept everyone standing, that was special. You remembered those players. You added them as friends, because that's the only way you would make sure you had a group to do that stuff with the next day. There wasn't a dungeon finder that you could queue into while watching Netflix and YouTube. You had to be social and you had to try. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. If you think Tinder is hard on average looking nerds today, you should try being an average damage dealing DPS in the early 2000s. When tanks and healers logged into the game, they got swiped right on more than supermodels on Tinder. They were instantly messaged by desperate damage dealers begging for a group so they could actually leave town. But just like on Tinder, those tanks and healers swiped left on almost all those requests. They were already spoken for. They had already fallen into a static group. Desperate damage dealers had already locked them down. It was the best time to be a tank and a healer, and probably the worst time to be a damage dealer. But man, when you found that click, a group that you look forward to logging in with and playing with every day, it was special. You'd shoot the breeze and comms while grinding through a dungeon until late in the night, knowing you'd all log back in the next day and maybe try out that new leveling spot or that new dungeon that you were all finally high enough level to do. But on the flip side, while some players were in that group making those memories, there were plenty of other players signing in just to realize they weren't going to get a group in time for it to be worth it, and they'd sign back.
Yeah, this is something that I hated back in the day with World of Warcraft. If you had a guild, you were a lucky person, right? But if you're someone that is like always busy, and either because of college or because you have a full-time job and a family, and you sometimes only get like 3-4 hours to play a day, right? Like, you can do a dungeon in 2-3 hours, no problem. But you need to be able to get into the dungeon quickly when your game time starts, right? Like, what if you can only play 4 hours a day and you want to do a certain dungeon with a group or something, but you need 2 or 3 hours to find a group or longer? Like, your time is almost over then. Like, the thing is, if it takes too long to find a group, you're ruining the fun. And what are you going to do? Are you going to do fishing somewhere at a lake to you're farming mounts and you're just spamming chat, or what are you doing in the meantime? Like, the thing about finding groups is it's so boring in the meantime because you don't know what to do, and quite often if it's like zone chat or you have to stay in capital cities and spam their zone chat, you can't even leave the city. If you're in a guild, yeah, you can spam your guild. Hey, are you guys online yet? When will you come online? Yeah, this is different with guild chat, but if it's zone chat, it's a very boring experience to stay in a town for an hour or longer to find a group. I hate this. And by the way, guys, if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content.
back out again after trying for sometimes hours. In other words, players were spending as much time looking for a group as they were being in a group. I remember standing in town looking for groups in Aiden and Lineage 2 or in Juno in Final Fantasy 11. I was a DPS in both games, and there were a lot of nights where I didn't get a group because I signed on too late due to school or work or life. And while I missed the camaraderie that came with forcing everyone to play together all the time, I don't miss that part of it. And even if you were one of the lucky ones that managed to form a static group, it only lasted so long. One person would level too fast, or one would level too slow, or one would go full Leroy Jenkins.
What the heck?
And their odds of playing together the next day weren't great, but I'd take those odds right now because at the moment, indicators are suggesting that a recession is on the way, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Masterworks. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, said that what's coming could be worse than a recession. So what are experts doing to prepare? They're following recently released guidance from BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, who says that a normal portfolio of stocks and bonds won't cut it anymore. For 2022 and beyond, BlackRock recommends diversifying with alternative assets, and of all the alternatives out there, only one was personally recommended by BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, contemporary art. Probably because contemporary art has outpaced the S&P 500 for the last 25 years by more than double, and it appreciates more than gold, real estate, and the S&P when inflation is high, at a whopping 33% annually. Repeating, of course. That's why I've partnered with Masterworks, because they're helping you secure your financial future by offering investments in the same contemporary art. This is not NFTs, this is fractional shares of actual paintings by legends like Picasso and Banksy. When Masterworks sells the paintings that you are invested in, you get a potential return. And the 6 paintings that they've sold so far have averaged a 29% net annual return, even through COVID, a bear market, and record high inflation. Now, of course, past performance is no guarantee of future results, but I think this is absolutely an option to consider when diversifying your portfolio. With inflation still crazy high and stocks still crazy low, Masterworks is seeing a record demand, but you can skip the waitlist by clicking the link down in the description below. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to it. Okay, so like I was saying, it's nearly impossible for a group of people to sync their lives together in a way that would allow them to progress through an MMO at the exact same speed. And even if you did have a static group and you were committed to staying in that static group, there would be days where you couldn't play because that meant you would outlevel the people in the group. And there's the rub. That's the reason that MMOs focused on having a solid single player experience began their rise to dominance. If the MMO had a fleshed out enough solo experience, you always had something to do. If your friends weren't on, or if you didn't have any to begin with, you could still make great progress in the game. And this was a welcome change. And more,
it is another problem when it comes to gearing. If you have to progress and make your character stronger by getting gear from certain dungeons, what if a few days you are very busy and you can't join the group, and then everyone in your group has like a new tier set or something, right? They have like even better gear, and you missed out a few runs because let's say 2 weeks you couldn't play for some reason. Then now you are a couple of gear pieces behind, and they rather take someone that has the gear already. Yeah, this is so annoying. Like, if you could at least gear solo well enough. ESO is like shown here right now, and in ESO, for example, you can solo get already the gear you need, and there's like a lot of strong craftable gear, right? So if you can craft gear yourself to progress, like, this is the thing. If you rely on gear and you need the group to get the gear, and then you miss out a few runs, this is so punishing. That's like, you are kind of like forced to always play if you can never take like a week or 2 off, especially if you are trying to stay with your static group, right?
More than ever before, we're seeing MMOs focus on the solo experience all the way from early on in their development. Here's a clip from the recent Ashes of Creation developer update.
Ashes of Creation is looking to fulfill both that solo-oriented mind in gameplay, as well as the group and social experience.
I think that's good.
Kind of started this, in my opinion. It had a very casual questing experience that would take you all the way through most of the game, but initially it lacked the Dungeon Finder. Later on, toward the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, the Dungeon Finder was finally added. No longer were we walking to dungeons and forming groups in zone chat. We are now queued into an instance and tossed into a group that may or may not acknowledge each other's existence in group chat. We successfully got rid of boring hours of standing around looking for a group, but we also successfully got rid of a ton of social interaction in the process. You don't need to make friends. You can just queue up for a dungeon when you want to, on your schedule. You are free, yes. It didn't matter if you were great at the game or bad at it. You'd get tossed into a group all the same. There was a lot less social accountability. One inevitable downside to this, dungeon content began to be designed for these types of groups. Random groups of strangers were more prone to giving up on a group as soon as it was apparent it wasn't going to be a smooth dungeon experience. They knew they could simply queue up for a dungeon group later, and as a result, commitment to to the group was lacking, and you couldn't have content as difficult as you used to.
And I think it got easier, yeah. Like, I remember back in the day, if you did like certain dungeons, there were certain mechanics and you have to do everything correct. If not, it's over. And then you had like those forgiving kind of mechanics where you just take a bit more damage than you would and stuff if you would dodge it, right? And yeah, like, I think this simplified a lot.
People just wouldn't stick around through the wipes. The solution was to make dungeon content easier. When's the last time you used a CC ability on an ad? No way. You pull that bad boy in and melt it down with everything else. Relying on players to CC mobs was tedious. It required communication. Cleaving it all down was easy. Everyone could be on the same page without even having to talk to each other. And I see this in all.
And if you had like a cooldown with your CC, you would tell your friend, hey, you're always the second to use the CC or something, right? And you would like talk with each other and you have like, okay, this is the first guy that always CCs. Okay, this person is the one that will be the second person that CCs and stuff. Yeah, I remember back in the day. And if you wiped, I actually like this a lot in FF14, for example. If your group wipes, it's still like that in FF14. They will just do it again, try again. But if you do this in, let's say, modern World of Warcraft, you wipe once or so. One time is even enough for most people. You will see the first person disband, like leave the group or something, or like the leader will try to disband it. Like, it is insane. One time you die and you are out of the group in World of Warcraft. I'm actually happy that it's not like that in FF14, because if you wipe once, well, you know what the group will say usually. I've not experienced anything else so far. Is they will say, hey, let's try again. And sometimes they will explain each other the mechanics in chat. You don't have this in World of Warcraft retail. No. Group is gone. One time you mess up, it's over. R.I.P. I hate this actually. I don't like when people give up too easily. Like, it's okay to sometimes wipe. It's alright. Next time you won't wipe, right? But many don't have that patience. I understand them somehow with not having patience, but I think you should do this when you wipe a second or third time, not the first time. I think that's a bit too soon to leave the group.
Almost every MMO, dungeons are generally pretty easy. They generally don't require a lot of communication, and as a result, they often end up being pretty forgettable. You romp through it, you melt everything inside, and then you forget the people and the content that you experience. It'd now be fair to describe most MMORPGs as single-player games, with some group content tacked onto the side. All of the biggest MMOs, like Final Fantasy XIV, ESO, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, they've all got tons and tons of solo content for you to do when you log in. Oftentimes, they have way more solo content than they do group content, and they've succeeded all the more for it. Players have spoken silently and with their wallets. They gravitate towards the MMOs with a fleshed out solo experience. They want the option to group up on their schedule and not somebody else's, and sometimes they want the option to not have to group up at all. So this begs the question, why play MMOs at all if you're the person that doesn't want to interact with anyone at all? And it's a fair question, but I think it's the fact that MMOs are an unending story. They're not just about interacting with other people, they are about the journey, the days, the weeks, the months that we put into them. They'll be relevant for years. It always feels bad when you're watching a good show and you go to put on the next season only to find out there isn't one. The show got canceled years ago. Or maybe this calls for a more direct comparison, such as when you're enjoying a single player game and you have an epic fight and you get that bittersweet feeling because you know a final battle when you see one. It's epic, it gives closure, and you're completely aware of the fact that you're likely only a few lines of dialogue and maybe a cutscene away from putting the game down forever. The character you're leveling up, the skills you unlock, the cool cosmetics you found, you'll never see them again, nor will anyone else. You beat the game and you'll probably never boot it up. It's a conflicting moment of wow, that was amazing, and damn, it's over. And that's where MMORPGs come in. They don't end, or at least you hope they won't anytime soon.
I mean,
you
they
don't
always
have
make
to walk away
updates
from the story and the character and the hero you leveled. You'll be jumping back onto it in the next expansion.
That's true. This is something I love about MMOs in comparison to some really cool solo RPG games. Like, I love Skyrim a lot, right? But I'm gonna be honest, if it wasn't for mods in Skyrim, I think Skyrim would be dead a long time ago. Like, you see this with like really old school RPG games that have barely any mods. Like, if you look at old school Diablo games, for example, barely anyone plays those anymore. Why? Because there's no more content coming in. You have only two options for a game to live for a long time, and that's by either having such a big modding community like you have with Skyrim, for example, where a year can be popular for many, many years, or it needs to be an MMO, because what MMOs do, we see this a lot with World of Warcraft, for example, we've seen this with Final Fantasy XIV. Each half year or year or so, there will be like a new dungeon, or like there will be a new expansion each 2 years or something, right? So those games can live for 10 plus years and still be played a lot. Like World of Warcraft is so old now, it's crazy. It's like a fossil amongst the MMOs, right? And it's still being played and very popular. If you look on Twitch, it's quite often still in the top 10 and stuff. What is interesting, right, for such an old game? And that's because MMOs keep getting updates. So they don't really end. That's good. And at the same time, it's also not good because it makes you stick too much to one game, and you maybe miss out other games experiences. Like what I've noticed about the MMO community, there are a lot of people that are very loyal to a game even though they complain about it a lot. And that's maybe because they hope for new content, new expansion. So they don't want to leave the game because they think something better comes. And they are on full copium, so they don't want to give other games a try. It's bad in a way, but in a way it's good because the game doesn't die if you actually do enjoy this game. But yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because it makes people that are not happy stay with a game quite often, unfortunately, because they have copium. They hope a new expansion comes that fixes everything. And yeah, the bad thing about it is it makes other games stay small. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would enjoy, for example, Elder Scrolls Online from the WoW community if they weren't on so much copium and would give other MMOs a try. Or maybe BDO. Some people maybe love this like crazy, but they don't want to try it because they are stuck with their MMO. So yeah.
You'll be jumping back onto it in the next expansion. There's also the fact that playing alone isn't always a conscious choice. It's not always a decision made through social anxiety. Sometimes it just happens that way. I don't consider myself a solo MMO player, but if I look back at my recent experiences in MMOs, I have a lot of time spent playing solo. It wasn't even a conscious decision I made, but my schedule fell out of sync with the people I tended to group with. I played the MMO for half the day and then maybe went to work on a YouTube video. The next day, they were levels ahead of me, and it didn't make sense to group. Or on the flip side, I'd be the one degenning the MMO the way we MMO players sometimes do, and someone in the group would have work, a new girlfriend, a new kid, or school, and they'd fall out of sync. And there's one critical problem that's arisen with the new progression rates of MMOs today. Even though you're only a day or two behind your friends, you might as well be on a different server while you're leveling up. They're working on different dungeons, different zones, and they're grabbing different materials, and while of course completing completely different quests. Fortunately, once you hit max level, that problem mostly tends to fade away, but you have to get to max level first, and so few players do these days. Look at New Worlds. Look at Lost Ark. This is why it's so critical for games to have a solo-friendly leveling experience. As much as we all dream of jumping into an MMO with our friends and leveling through the whole thing together, life just gets in the way. Most of us have either school, jobs, significant others, or a family, or some combination of the four that require varying amounts of our time. So let's circle back to the question at the beginning of the video. MMOs were more popular than ever when they forced us to play together, when they lacked dungeon finders and raid finders. But these days, MMOs are often built with the solo player at the forefront of their design. Do MMOs attract fewer players?
I think also one of the reasons why MMOs were so popular when there was like little solo stuff is because it's the same with like school, right? Or with a job. You sometimes go to your job or school even if you don't like it there because you have friends and people you like to see there. And job, of course, it's even different because you need it to survive, right? But those that still enjoy their day at the job and love to wake up to go there, they often do it because of the people there, right? Like this was me with school. Like I sometimes had days where when I was still a student, I'm no longer, where I would like not want to go to school, and I was thinking, should I just call in and say I have a headache or something so I don't go? But then I realized, oh, my friend is there and he has something cool he wants to show me today. You know what? Screw that. I'm not gonna not go to school. I will go to school because I want to see my friend. And this is the thing with back in the day, because you had this strong community and you had like a circle of friends, you would try to play as much as you can to meet your friends in the online world instead of real life. So it was kind of like meeting friends, so you would like to come back. And how when you have so much solo content and stuff, you no longer have this desire to play the game to meet someone in there, right? So that's probably why people play less and some even quit.
play together when they lacked dungeon finders and raid finders. But these days, MMOs are often built with the solo player at the forefront of their design. Do MMOs attract fewer players because of this change? Or do MMOs attract fewer players because we changed? WoW's population peaked at around 12 million current subscribers all the way back in 2010. It's been on the decline since, and no other MMO has even come close to reaching its concurrent player base. Why is that? Is it due to switching the focus to the solo experience? I don't think so. The most successful MMOs today have the best solo content. I think we changed, so the MMOs had to follow suit. We were once okay with standing in town for an hour looking for a group. It was all new and shiny, this whole going online and grouping with people from around the world. Most players had never really experienced that before, but the novelty...
I think it's actually simpler than that, the reason why MMOs are less popular. It's because we have now more games to pick and more MMOs. Because this waiting in town that he just described, if you are someone that's now, let's say, 17, 18 years old and you get your first MMO ever, you're basically the same person as the older generation was also back in the day when they had their first MMO. But now the difference is you enter a genre of games that is full of those, right? You have so many options. You have ESO, you have BDO, you have Guild Wars, you have Final Fantasy, you have World of Warcraft, now Ashes of Creation is coming, New World is there. There are just so many MMOs, and they had like a lot of marketing and stuff, and they were like pushed out with like a lot of advertisements. Like even these days, like sometimes I still get like Final Fantasy 14 and other MMO advertisements when I open like a freaking video somewhere, and there's like an add-on, right? So of course there's like so much options now, so we don't have this kind of need to stick to one game, because we can just pick whatever game we want in this whole genre, right? So I think like people are spread way more, and that's also one of the reasons why it seems like the genre is kind of dying, because there's just so much more options, and you have now 10% of those players play this game, 15% this game, 5% there, 20% this, then 2-3% there, and 2-3 there. So this is the whole of the people that play MMOs. They're all spread. And if their games are small because there's so much option, what happens if a game is small? You're more likely to even quit this game too. So it's like a boomerang effect, right? So yeah. That's, I think, the main reason why, in my opinion, MMOs are not so much popular anymore, because there's so many and the communities are just smaller, and a small community usually doesn't stay strong for long. So, yeah.
Wore off. The excitement of being able to log into a game and play it with other people wasn't new anymore, and no longer outweighed the disappointment of standing in town looking for a group. And not only that, every week new online games were popping up that could also satisfy that same online desire. The only difference is they had you in a match in 5 minutes. Today, being subjected to an hour-long wait in town, trying to form a party in zone chat is a quit moment for most players. There's too many other options now, too many other multiplayer games that will have you in a match in an instant. Some say MMOs are dead as a result, and I don't agree with that. Recent MMO launches have been insane. There are still millions of players looking for and hoping for an MMO to grab them the way that the genre once did. You saw it twice in the last year, with millions showing up for the launches of New World and Lost Ark. Neither of those games held on to all of their players, but there were a lot of reasons for that prevent those games from being indicators of a dead genre.
One was
Lost Ark's pay-to-win nature ensures that it will only ever see limited success here in the West, despite actually being a solid game. And New World, it came out of the oven half-baked. It wasn't finished, but it's now making the same pivot the rest of the major MMOs did after their launches. It's hard focusing on that solo experience. It's completely revamped and fleshed out its questing experience so that you can follow a main quest chain all the way through the game. It also added a dungeon finder. It's realized that these are the things that most MMO players crave these days. Is all of this working for New World? In anticipation of all this new content, combined with its new zone and new weapon, its player base is up 40% in the last 30 days. Wait, scratch that. I just refreshed the page. Make that 46% in the...
This is something I'm thinking also, that New World will have some sort of comeback again also if like a new expansion comes out. I've heard they're working on something, right? But I'm not sure if it comes out in a year or two. But there will be more expansions and stuff.
the last 30 days. Looks like their focus on the players without friends is starting to pay off. So
Yeah.
has the soloification of MMOs ruined the genre? I don't think so. The developers didn't make MMOs solo. We did by gravitating towards the MMO that offered the stronger solo experiences. When I'm playing MMOs, most of my time is spent doing what I want to do. When I want to do it, I am literally one of the players taking advantage of the solo experience MMOs are now adding. I frequently tune into Asmongold, who has millions of people that would love to play with him, and see him doing the same thing, whether it's farming mounts in WoW
Yeah,
or grinding
solo
up his
stuff.
gathering levels in New World. He's also taking advantage of the solo opportunities. I think it's because it's nice to be able to go at your speed. Sometimes you just want a solo chill activity. When you're a content creator trying to keep up with chat, or a dad trying to keep up with children, or students trying to keep up with class, the flexibility of having the solo content to dive into on those nights where you only have an hour or your friends aren't available, it makes all the difference when
True.
you're deciding what game to boot up. And as history shows, when one game offered the experience of standing in town trying to form a group and another offered anything else, we gravitated towards
So the
anything
anything
else.
else,
And
yes.
worded like that, it's not so surprising, is it? I think the best thing MMOs can do now is have a ton of solo content waiting for us when we need it, and a
The
ton of
balance
group
of both.
content waiting for us when we want it. And that's the big difference. A lot of times when you're doing the solo content, it's because you need it. It's because there isn't really an option to do the group content at the moment because you don't have people available to.
Like what I think is important is progression must be soloable. Like if you want to have like the best kind of gear and you want to be like top with everything, I think that should be a part that you can do solo. And group stuff should be for some nice stuff. Let's like say mounts or certain achievements, or maybe something that's just a little bit better than what you can get from doing solo stuff, right? But yeah, you shouldn't force actually people to play in a group. That's what I think. That's how I see it.
Do it, or you don't have the time to do it.
Don't
In
force them,
conclusion, solo content
encourage
didn't
them.
ruin the genre, it kept it relevant. We're just not willing to stand around town for hours at a time looking for groups anymore. There's too many other online games that can put us into a game instantly.
I'm so hyped
What
for
type of
Ashes of
player are
Creation.
you? Are you the solo player or the group player or a little of both? If you enjoyed this video,
I'm
be sure to
hybrid
like
on
and
both.
subscribe for more MMO content and to help out with Algorithm Senpai. I appreciate it. And if you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it. This is just my opinion. These are just my ramblings, so you're certainly welcome to disagree. And as always, a massive shout out to my YouTube members. Thank you so much for joining and helping support the channel so that I can continue to make the best content possible for you guys. And if you ever want to hang out with someone else that loves MMOs, be sure to swing by my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. And if you don't have any plans, maybe check out one of the videos popping up on screen right now.
Okay, I'll give this one a thumbs up. It was very informative. And yeah, the thing is now the time. Like I myself sometimes have it where I can only some days have 4 or 5 hours where I can play. And if I take half of my time to find a group, of course I'll be pissed. So yeah, it's good that they make this simpler. And some people were already like worried in World of Warcraft Classic, like, oh, we're getting Wrath of the Lich King. That means a group finder is coming. Who cares about, like, look at how popular it is now, and you're still having a blast. It's still fun to play Wrath of the Lich King Classic. And yeah, I'm so hyped for Ashes of Creation. I've checked out some of the interviews, and also where like Steven said they want to have like a balance of, they want to give the solo part, right, where you can be a solo player, but they also want to not get completely rid of group stuff. So I'm actually curious on how they will pull it off and how much the balance will be between solo content and group content in Ashes of Creation. So far, Ashes of Creation looks really fun and promising. I like the combat. I like that it's like half tap targeting and half action kind of like combat. This is sort of like in ESO where you can also have like reactive combat and stuff, right? And I wish ESO was more popular, because I think ESO is also pretty interesting when it comes to like the story, the environment. But then again, like all Elder Scrolls games usually have a very nice world, right? And that there's an MMO to that, but that is not so popular, sadly. Yeah, but I think it's also a bit because I was kind of like, there was like a bad reputation for a while for ESO, because like the devs did some stuff that the community didn't want, especially in PvP, and it pushed away a lot of big content creators from the game. And yeah, I don't know. But yeah, Ashes of Creation looks interesting. I'm very, very excited about Dragonflight in World of Warcraft, and I do believe also that more and more MMOs become more and more solo friendly, and it's just like a new trend. We are living in a very fast society, you could say, where people have limited time, because you're all busy with the daily life. So I think it's good to have this kind of solo stuff, and it makes you want to log in even more, because I always feel like sort of under pressure when I have to log in to play in a group. Like, what if one day I feel tired or a little bit sick or something, or I'm not at my best, but I still want to play a game? Then if I'm solo, I have nobody checking my performance. Like, how well do I play? Am I the best in the group? Is my DPS number one? So if I feel not so energetic on one day and I have solo content in a game, I'm more likely to log in than in a game where I have to be always at my 100% best, and I must perform amazingly, splendidly. I must be the best in because there are some groups that have like high demands, especially if you're doing like let's say in WoW, like super high M+ keys. Like, you have to be perfect with your rotation, you can't be slacking. So yeah, I don't know. I think it does attract also more players if you add more solo content, because now you have those players that come from like other genre and that are not so familiar with the MMO genre, and it's more friendly for them to get into because there's just so much solo content as well. I think you can pull more players into your game. The only issue is maybe you can't make a strong community, and people are more likely to quit or only part-time play the game. Where back in the day you had a strong community, right? So people would always log back in. But yeah, guys, that's it for today's video. If you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. I wish everyone a wonderful day. I will see you guys next time.